All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Katrina Kibben. I'm the managing editor of Recruiting Daily, and you are listening to the Recruiting Tools Podcast, a podcast that is named so obviously that you better know what we're talking about. My name's Katrina Kibben, like I said, and my co-host with the most is Amy Miller. Amy, how you doing?
Hello, I'm good. I'm really excited about this tool.
Me too. Because, you and I obviously we talk a lot about different topics,
Yep,
about tools, but one topic that consistently comes up is salary negotiation. What kinds of
every day.
questions do you get most often when it comes to salary negotiation?
Oh man. So I think that people are divided squarely into two camps when it comes to salary. I have the active candidates who are now at salary stage who totally clam up and don't want to talk about it at all. And then I have the kind of the outliers that are not engaged with me or my company or my positions, and they're just balls out confused. Like they don't know how to know their worth. They don't know when and how they should talk about money. It's really hard for them. I guess it always, which is interesting about today's tool, is it really centers around how do I know what to ask for? How do I know what I'm worth? So there's a lot of confusion around that. And I think that's at the heart of all the other questions that we get as well. Because you can't start the salary conversation unless you know what you're asking for. You don't know how to negotiate a bigger number if you don't know that that bigger number is manageable. So all the questions that I get can all be pointed directly back to this problem of what is my worth?
Yeah. Well, and I think too, it boils down to this fear, right? People are
Yes,
so
huge.
scared that this is a deal breaker. And if they say
Mhm.
the wrong thing, it'll end the conversation with the perfect candidate.
Yeah. And they're also terrified of leaving money on the table. There is, and we've talked about this before, not to get off topic too much, but people are so afraid that if they're not negotiating, for every last dime that they can possibly squeeze out a company, that they're somehow leaving money on the table. And unfortunately, the reverse often happens where if you have someone negotiating too hard and too heavy, it turns into offer fatigue, and the teams, the managers, the companies are like, forget it, I'm out. I can't, this person isn't worth it. And not even from a numbers perspective, but just the high maintenance, taste that's left in the manager's mouths. And so really understanding at least a ballpark and at least a really good starting point, I think will save everyone a lot of pain.
Absolutely. And I think that's a great segue to introduce our guest today. Lisa, why don't you tell people a little bit about yourself? Obviously, you work at Glassdoor, but tell us a little more.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me. Super excited to be on the podcast today. My name is Lisa Holden, and I head up employer communications here at Glassdoor. And what that means is I have a public relations background, and so I've spent the majority of my career helping companies rather, understand how to brand themselves and market themselves in various capacities. And here at Glassdoor, that means talking to a lot of employers specifically around their employer brand. So that's what I do here at Glassdoor, and I'm excited to be on the podcast today to show you a new tool from Glassdoor called Know Your Worth, which will hopefully help employees, employers, and job seekers have more informed salary negotiations.
Totally. Because I bet you get a lot of questions about how salary correlates with those reviews or if they're seeing any kinds of trends with
Definitely.
salary.
Definitely. I mean, our mission here at Glassdoor has always been to help people everywhere find jobs and companies they love. And the way that we do that is through workplace transparency. And when we launched in 2008, we launched giving people the ability to write reviews about companies, which was a huge transparency step. When we added the ability for people to share their salaries, that was another major step for workplace transparency because for the first time, this anonymous data was out there from your peers that could give you a better sense of what you should be earning. And employers reasonably panicked a bit because that's a pretty scary thing to have suddenly out there. What your company is actually like based on the opinion of those who know best and how much you're paying them. Yikes. So
Yeah.
um, it took a bit for employers to get used to that, and they still come to us with questions about like, can you take this information down, or we don't want this out there. And the reality is, the conversation I have often with employers is that this information is going to get out there one way or another. Glassdoor is a platform that people are using and find helpful, to have these conversations in a more formalized way. And the beauty of having this on the internet is that you, as the employer, can be involved in this conversation as well. So when employers come to us kind of panicking about workplace transparency, I remind them that it can actually be a real boon for your employer brand to involve yourself in these conversations. And know your worth is another opportunity for them to do that. I mean, this tool is out there. This kind of information is out there. Someone could reasonably put together an analysis like this of their own market value, but it would take a lot of work, and they could bring that to the employer, who would be less ready for it. And our hope is that by formalizing this tool, making it easy for job seekers and employees to use, that we're also making it easier for employers to get a sense of what people are going to bring to a salary negotiation and prepare for that as well.
Totally. So I've seen the product. I think it's really cool. And that's why I asked Amy, because she was the first person I thought of. So why don't you show us kind of the quick how to? We'll ask questions along the way, and then we can jump back into how this really helps the recruiter.
Perfect. And please do interrupt me along the way. Introducing Know Your Worth by Glassdoor. It's essentially a tool that gives anyone a personalized market value estimate to help inform salary negotiations. So let's pretend that you work at Apple in Cupertino, California, where the company is based, and you're a senior software engineer with about 8 years of experience. And let's say right now you make 160. So you're putting these various factors into the tool, and these are all components that are helping us analyze your market worth. And so right now this tool collects base salary. We can collect additional elements of your compensation package, but right now those don't go into your full estimate. So as a beta version of this product, take that into consideration when you see your results, and I'll show you a little bit more about what I mean by that.
So Lisa, real quick, is the goal though that we would want people to enter that in here, because this is all part of gathering the data to make this better over time, right?
Yes. So this is a machine learning algorithm we're dealing with.
Got it.
And the reason that that is important is the more data it has, the smarter it gets. So as we're adding these elements, the more data you share with us, the smarter we get. And in future iterations of this product, obviously our goal is to have this information be included there, and so you can get a more detailed and nuanced estimate. So down at the bottom here, you can also elect to share this information publicly on Glassdoor, publicly and anonymously. So just like you would share a salary review on Glassdoor, you can give us this information and we'll put it on the site if you want. If you don't want, you can easily use Know Your Worth as a salary tool without showcasing your current salary on Glassdoor. So we'll leave it off Glassdoor because that is not my salary or my title.
Details.
And here is another optional section. And so again, this machine learning algorithm, we have big plans for this guy, right? And the more information, the smarter we get. And so we want to start collecting other pieces of helpful demographic data that can help us uncover perhaps unconscious bias or look for pay gaps among certain groups. And so we ask about education, gender, and how old you are to start to gather that data so that down the line we can draw conclusions from that in aggregate. These are optional fields though, so I'll just leave them blank for now. But I have a bachelor's degree if anyone's curious. All right, so this is what spits out at the end, and this is your market value. So that senior software engineer who's being paid 160 actually has a market value of more like 176, which is pretty interesting. So of the factors that we know about this person, he or she works at Apple, is based in Cupertino, where there's a relatively high cost of living, and has 8 years of experience, meaning that on average they're a little higher in the market in terms of value than a typical senior software engineer in Cupertino. And that's probably because they work at a company like Apple, which we know has a lot of street cred in the tech scene. A lot of people who go from Apple to other organizations tend to be high value. It has a good reputation for spitting out smart people. And so that is all part of what we're calculating. We watch people go from job to job. We can see that data on our site, and part of that algorithm accounts for what kind of company are they at, how valuable is that company if they were to become an alumni. And so what you're seeing here, this red dot is your current pay, 160. The green line is your market value. In other words, what you could reasonably negotiate for in the market today. And then the purple is what a typical person who looks a lot like you in terms of these characteristics is making right now. And this data is actually updated week on week. So the reason your market value changes a little bit is based on how many jobs are open right now. And Glassdoor is a jobs aggregator, so we can see how many jobs are available right now this week for a senior software engineer, and that goes into your market value estimate, because if a lot of companies are hiring for this job right now, you're in high demand.
Yeah. I like that you take in those factors because those are real factors that recruiters have to consider when they're talking about a new candidate, right, Amy?
Yeah, and I mean, it's fascinating that we can look at this and say, well, gosh, the average person who looks like you is making 156. You're already at 160. I feel pretty good about offering you 165 as an example. But wait, the market value says something completely different. So that is fascinating and a little bit scary. I think it's great for the candidate, but please continue. I'm gonna take this in for a moment.
Totally. And you know, when we launched this tool, we knew that would be a little bit disruptive, and we don't want you to feel scared, but we do recognize that that's a scary thing, right? And so something else that we launched when we launched Know Your Worth was actually an employer guide, which walks employers through how to have conversations around this. Because at the end of the day, this is a really helpful tool that incorporates a lot of different data points to tell you more information than you've had access to before about your market value, but it can't, and it's not designed to tell the complete story. So the factors that we can collect on Glassdoor, we can make a lot of sense of those, but we don't have certain other elements that really inform a salary negotiation. For example, performance review data. We don't know how this person is doing as a senior software engineer. Maybe they're barely making it, and they're lucky to still be employed at Apple.
Sure.
You know, maybe they have other perks that we can't account for within the system, like a company car or unlimited vacation, catered lunch every day, things like that, that can, of course, shift how what you see as your total compensation package. And you know, this tool is disruptive, and we see that, but we hope that it is a catalyst for really important conversations that employers and recruiters should be having with candidates and employees, so that both sides of the house are clear on the compensation package and the expectation behind it. Our CHRO actually published a blog post on this when the tool came out, and she was like, I panicked too. You know, I was going to have these conversations too. And at the end of the day, I really had to understand this tool and figure out how to articulate what this accounts for and what it doesn't account for, so that I can have informed conversations with internal employees at Glassdoor who want to know if they're being paid fairly.
So, and so I just want to go back to the market value. So this is, I see where it changes over time, and it's based on, I think you mentioned, obviously, the number of available roles. Does it take into account even just the number of, you know, engineers in a given area? Because that's one of the things, especially when we get into diversity discussions, where there is a limited number of female engineers. There just is, no matter how you slice it. So regardless of the specific skills or qualifications or technical aptitude, there is literally a finite number. A small percentage of total engineers happen to be women. So how much does things like that weigh into, not necessarily the diversity stuff, but again, just that number of available talent? How much does that weigh into market value?
Yeah, I mean, that's such a great point and something that we hope to include in this algorithm
Okay,
event.
got it.
So
Perfect.
beta version doesn't include that kind of thing, but that's the exact, yeah, I mean, you nailed it on the direction we want to take this, right?
Okay,
The more
excellent.
people who use the platform, if we could get an aggregate sense of how many software engineers there are and how many of them are women based on who's using our platform,
Yeah.
huge. So more to come on that.
Okay.
Well, and I
Cool.
think too, though, in the positive camp, this is a lot more than most salary tools offer now.
Yes. Yes.
So Amy, what are some of the tools that you know of, and do they include any of those external factors, or is it very much like this means
No, I'm always looking for things that I can share with candidates to help drive these conversations. One of my favorites right now, which is the opposite of what you guys are doing, so I think this will be a great marriage between my favorite tool and now my new favorite tool, this one. There is a great job offer calculator on Fidelity.
Oh,
And I
cool.
always tell candidates, hey, this is not a Microsoft tool. This is completely agnostic. This is a brokerage that is going to allow you to plug in all of these numbers and do that comparison. How does my Apple salary currently compare to my potential Microsoft salary? And so you can plug that in. And that's
Yes.
great once you know the numbers, right? But if you don't know the numbers and you don't know what I should ask for or where I should currently be or what I can take to my next review to make sure that my raise is on point with where I should be in the market, that's only half the story. So I think these two things together can create a lot of empowerment for candidates. The only other thing
So,
I've seen, which is kind of sucky, are the traditional like pay scale and salary.com, things like that. And those are just very generic, broad. It's more like software engineers in Washington versus very clear, this company, this level, these years of experience. This is a lot more detailed. So I'm really excited to start sharing this with candidates too.
well, Amy, I'm so glad that you brought up that Fidelity tool because it leads me to another part of this platform that I do want to show you, which is
Oh,
after after you calculate your market value here, you can scroll down and see a few open jobs that you might be interested in based on what we now know you're worth. But beyond that, we also have this tool called Salary Explorer your worth that allows people to do some forward looking and some estimations on how they want their future to look. So
yeah,
you know that you are worth 176 right now with the factors that are true today. But let's say you're still that senior software engineer. You still have 8 years of experience at a relatively similar sized company. But what if you were to move to Dallas? And
hmm
how would that change what you, oops, senior software engineer, pardon me, how would that change what you're worth? Okay, so you'd be making more like 103 in Dallas,
yeah,
which thing. But what if you didn't do that for a few more years? So maybe you have a few more years experience now. Maybe you're a director of software engineering. Pardon, there we go. Uh, then okay, you'd be making more like 152. So maybe we hold
yeah,
off on the move for a few years. And so you get what this tool is for, right? This is for where you are today based on the market data that we have, and this is what we can tell you about your future. Obviously, this can't take into account as much as the above portion
yeah.
can because we're not looking at open jobs, for example, as a data point, but this can start to give you a sense so that you can plan your future.
I like this too because, a
Yeah.
newbie recruiter who's trying to run a region or nationwide placements might have a
Mhm.
really good grasp of the local environment, but not what it's like in Dallas, what it's like in New
Yeah.
York. And I'm sure you run into that, Amy.
All the time. And I don't know, too many areas outside. And I run into this a lot as well, where I have candidates coming from different parts of the country and they're they're really concerned about cost of living.
Yeah,
So sometimes their expectations are super inflated because they have this idea of what the Bay Area is like, or what the Seattle area is like. And it's true to an extent. Like, even just looking at the Dallas versus the Bay Area, you're gonna like buy a neighborhood for the price of a house in the Bay Area, in
Oh,
Dallas.
yeah.
So you can like literally own a block, right? But sometimes they're so inflated and they're so concerned, like, oh my gosh, it's so expensive. And you know this I think provides a little bit more realism into the process, as opposed to you have to double your salary because you're leaving Wisconsin.
exactly. Exactly. And part of that location information is helping us. We calculate cost of living, obviously, as part of this. And so we're able to give people more information than they would reasonably be able to get, and until
Yeah.
you are somewhere and living. For example, I live in San Francisco, and I know the cost of living song well. And you learn to make those adjustments once you're there. So we're trying to give people more information before they get there.
Yeah. So at what
Very
point in
cool.
the recruiting process might you share this with someone, Amy? And what context would you give them?
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking like this, I would share this pretty early on. And me, like we've had this conversation before and we've done other podcasts talking about salaries. I like to talk money early, often, and specifically. That's my mantra, right? Along with assume good intent. So for me, I think once we've now identified you're interested in my organization, we have a strong possibility of connecting you with the business or with an engineering leader, in my case, for conversations around potential roles. We need to start talking about money, at least at the very high level. So I think this is a point where I would say, hey, listen, you're living in Austin, as an example. You're living in Austin right now. We're starting that conversation about potentially looking at things in Redmond. Let me share this with you so you can start thinking about, if and when the time comes, what's that salary conversation going to look like? That's where I see inserting this in the process, and then checking in periodically as we get closer to offer stage.
Yeah, and I love that part about following up and continuing to talk about salary because again, this isn't, one spot and they're going to
Yeah,
land on one spot and never want to talk about salary again, right? It's going to
totally.
be
And
evolving.
this is, I got just a little side note. This is what separates consultants from order fillers.
Hmm.
Mm.
Because I may have that conversation. So this is for our recruiters that are listening. I may have that conversation with that guy in Austin, right? My mythical candidate. And he may decide, I don't want to move. I got kids in high school, or I just got promoted, or whatever reason comes up, right? He's not going to come to my company at this time. But because I have given him market insight and I've given him some tips that make him more effective in his job search and all the ripple effects of that, of doing that well for him and his family, he's going to remember me, and as a byproduct, my company, in a very positive way. That's consulting. That's not order filling. That's consulting, and we all need to do more of that.
Absolutely. I'm like quiet clapping over here. Like,
Yay!
amen.
You're not the only one.
Yeah. So so here's another question. What if they come to this and they hit a number that's like way out there? Like you said before, we talked about the fear side, right? The like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, what if people come to me with a number that's bigger than I'm at? And I'm interested in both of your perspectives on this. Both, from Lisa as writing this up and trying to figure out how, to educate people on this, but also from Amy's, insider opinion for what to do when it's just a little higher than maybe you're expecting or the client's expecting, client slash candidate's expecting. Go ahead, Amy.
Oh, you want me to go first? Okay.
You
Wow.
are a
So I think
co-host.
there's a lot of things we have to consider here. So I think recruiters need to be on top of this and running this for their positions, first of all. Even before you get to engaging candidates, you should be playing the candidate role. So forgive me, Lisa, we're not going to put that on Glassdoor because we're faking it. But I think we need to know what those numbers are going to look like before we get to the candidate conversation. Two reasons for that. First of all, sometimes this can create some very interesting data points and some trends that we then take back to not only our businesses, but maybe our HR partners, our compensation analysts. If we can show them these trends, hey, look, we're seeing a real uptick and we're showing over time how the market value has changed for this software engineer, we need to think about how we're going to compete against that. So that then becomes either a conversation about we're going to go in and fix our salary ranges, or it becomes a really difficult conversation for the recruiter and the hiring manager to talk about how do we sell against that. We're a small mom and pop nonprofit and we just don't have the budget, but we need the talent. How do we create a compelling story that doesn't rely on money? So if you know what you're up against, it's not a matter of necessarily meeting that salary requirement, but it's knowing that this is what the world is expecting. I'm going to come in at probably 140 because we're a nonprofit, and here's the story I'm going to tell to get people to take less money.
Yeah.
Amy, I'm going to say that you're perfectly right, and I have the data to back you up. So,
Yay, I love data. I learned a very valuable lesson. I actually got bad feedback once from a manager. I knew I shouldn't have asked him, but there it was. And I was very upset. And I went to my skip level manager and I just can't believe this guy doesn't like me. And oh my gosh, what's happening? And my life is ruined. My career is over. And he said, Amy, it's a data point. It's not a trend. When you start seeing the same data points popping and you have this, like there's a history, that's when you start to worry. That's when you really pay attention to the data. It's a data point, not a trend. And so I apply that now in everything. If I have some crazy outlier candidate who swears he needs 200K, I don't have any other data to back that up, so I don't care.
right,
But when
right.
I have those trends, and so what you're showing us with the lines and how those things are tracking over time, that's when we need to start paying attention.
Right, right. And going back to your point, which was beautifully articulated, that salary is only one piece of this puzzle. When you're trying to get in a candidate, what story can you tell about your
Yeah.
mission, your vision, to really bring them in? That's not fluffy stuff.
Yeah.
We did some economic research on this, actually. Our chief economist looked at overall satisfaction, which we have a lot of data on Glassdoor. So how often people put that they were very satisfied overall with their company. And then we looked at various workplace factors that we collect data on, like work-life balance,
Yeah.
compensation and benefits, culture, etc. And we found that the biggest drivers to overall satisfaction, compensation's towards the bottom. When people are really satisfied
Yeah.
with compensation, they're not necessarily very satisfied with their company. The biggest drivers for overall satisfaction are career opportunities, culture, and senior leadership. So your managers managing you and helping you, you feeling like you have room to grow, and you feeling like you're happy where you are, you're happy with the people around you. Those are the things that really drive satisfaction. So if you can set that up during the recruiting process and display what it is about your company that's so great in those avenues, you're going to have a lot of success with candidates who maybe are thinking they should really focus on the salary and the comp number, but there's so much more to think about when you're deciding where to work.
Yeah, for sure.
And we hear, and I think too, it's like at some point it got beaten into so many recruiters' heads that salary was the number one thing. That's all you need. And that's just not true.
It's
Um,
just not.
right?
Yep.
Like I had a story from Derek Zeller a few weeks ago where he told me this whole thing about this like super specialized database, clearance, top secret, blah, blah, blah. And you know what the guy wanted? It was not about money. It was not about his commute. He just wanted a second screen. And his current
Yeah.
company would not buy the guy a second screen.
Crazy.
Right? You're
So
like,
great.
well, hell, I'll buy you the second screen. Just walk
Right? No
around.
kidding.
Hilarious.
But really, it is
But that's
about motivation.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, Lisa, I want to give you guys kudos because so many companies hold their data really, just like their cards close to their chest, right? And they
Yeah.
don't make that data easily accessible to the other side of the marketplace, whoever their customer is, especially in this space.
Mhm.
So big kudos to Glassdoor for actually making this, taking the data that you're already collecting and building it into something that's usable for both sides of your marketplace.
Well, thank you, Katrina. That's always been our goal. Our founders, Robert Homan and Rich Barton and Tim Bessie, have been involved in some other companies that basically bring power to the people, for lack of a better way to put it. But they really understand that information is power, and they want to bring it to people as much as they can. Rich Barton's also the founder of Zillow, which
Okay.
is bringing more information to the home buying market. And Tim Bessie, Robert Holman, and Rich Barton were all involved in Expedia, which brought more transparency to travel. And so this is just another way that we are taking information and putting it in the hands of people to do smart and better things with it and be more informed and have better, more effective salary negotiations. And so we're delighted to bring this, to the marketplace and let people use it.
Awesome.
Yeah,
So, any
love it.
final notes, Amy, from you about salary or advice for people who are struggling with the
Yeah.
negotiation?
I mean, I think that with any of these tools, I think as much as I'm loving this tool, I think it's great and I can't wait to play around in it a little bit more. I purposely did not get into it until our call today because I didn't want to come in with like preconceived notions and, like already kind of having an opinion before I got to see it in action. I think we need to take this as part of the whole conversation. What I don't want candidates to do and I don't want recruiters to do is just lean on this as the sole kind of holy grail of information. But I think this is a very, very important piece of it, and we should utilize this. And I think we should use it very early in the process. Start the conversation, use it as a launching point. And, one thing I did notice too, I noticed with this salary engineer one, this was derived from 31,000 pieces of information, right? There's like all these other salaries that are recorded. When I did it for myself, a recruiter in Seattle, it was more like 300. So, the numbers may be a little bit skewed because of that. So I would love to see all of us start putting this data in. Let's see if we can build this and make it even more useful. The more data you have, the smarter your tool is going to get, as you mentioned, Lisa, and just the more relevant the information I think will be. So I can't wait to watch it and see how it goes.
Absolutely.
Awesome. You're exactly right. The more data we have, the smarter it gets. And the one final thing I would say too, to your point, is that employers who are worried that this isn't representative, or doesn't take the right things into account, should encourage employees to post their salary on Glassdoor and use
Yeah,
this tool so that it does get more robust and it does get more accurate. That's all we.
absolutely. And the more that we know what's out there and what our candidates are looking at, the more we can speak to it. Whether it's for or against. And I'll go back to that nonprofit. That the person who's maybe going to come in really low by comparison, you need to know that that's where you're coming in. And that's where something like this is so valuable, not because I, as the manager of a nonprofit, am ever going to compete with Apple, but I know what's out there. I know how to spin my story so that I can still attract the right talent. So sticking our heads in the sand and pretending that, this stuff doesn't matter is not helping anyone.
Amen.
Absolutely. So, Lisa, your moment to plug. How do people find Know Your Worth on Glassdoor?
All right. Well, if you just visit glassdoor.com, I will show you how to get there. You will see a little salary function here. And right at the top, it says, "Are you paid fairly?" Simply click on Get Your Estimate, and you will be on the page of the tool. So I encourage you to check it out, and it's already calculating mine, but
Of course. It's smart. Very cool.
that's how you
All
get there.
right. Well, Lisa, thank you so much for being here. And I'll obviously thank you to my co hostess with the mostest, Amy Miller. Um, and if you have a tool that you'd like to cover here on the Recruiting and Tools podcast, please just send a note to either Amy or myself. Our contact information will be on the bottom of this page. And we'd be more than happy to have you on the air and show off your tool. All right. Well, thank you so much for listening, and we'll be back soon.